Pinning down the author figure in the Prelude is a little bit complicated because we don't just meet one narrator, we actually encounter three versions of Wordsworth, so it's a kind of triangulation, a persona with three sides. First of all, we hear about the young boy who's never been to London but dreams of what it's like, conjuring all sorts of far-fetched imaginings from tales he has read about in childhood. Then there's the young man on whom the action centres, who takes up residence in London after studying at Cambridge and returns to visit later on with his sister. And finally, all of this is rendered into verse by Wordsworth, the older figure, the poet, more sober, looking back, thinking of how the experiences have changed him, made him into the poet he is.
So there are three versions of London in this poem. One is imagined, one is experienced, and one is remembered. And each belongs to a different one of the three personae, the young boy, the young man, and the older poet. I want to pay some attention, for starters, to this child figure imagining the city without having been there. Wordsworth recalls how he envisioned London when the place seemed so alien to him that it fit alongside what we call Orientalist visions or fairy tales of a dreamlike Asia. He even begins his recollections in this part of the poem with fairy tale language.
He says, "There was a time when whatsoe'er is feigned of airy palaces and gardens built by genii of romance, or hath in grave authentic history been set forth of Rome, Al-Cairo, Babylon, or Persepolis, or given upon report by pilgrim friars of golden cities 10 months' journey deep among Tartarian wilds, fell short, far short, of that which I in simpleness believed and thought of London, held me by a chain less strong of wonder and obscure delight."
Despite his more exotic imaginings, Wordsworth recalls that as a child he was most fascinated by the social conditions he heard of in London. I'm quoting here, "Above all, one thought baffled my understanding, how men lived even next door neighbours, as we say, yet still strangers." On the one hand, it's his most banal statement about the city so far. It's even a kind of anticlimax after the Orientalist daydreams that came before it. But as we shall see, it's the aspect of London with which Wordsworth most struggles to come to terms in the poem, both in contemplation from afar and in direct encounter when he talks about being there. Nothing could be more foreign to Wordsworth than this separated humanity, this unshared experience of people being together but not knowing each other. It's more strange to him than the magic of fairy tales because the impersonal nature of urban life seems so bizarre. After telling us about some of his more far-fetched ideas about London as a child, Wordsworth relates the kind of information he encountered about the city in books.
"Vauxhall and Ranelagh, I then had heard of your green groves and wilderness of lamps, your gorgeous ladies, fairy cataracts and pageant fireworks. Nor must we forget those other wonders, different in kind, though scarcely less illustrious in degree, the river proudly bridged, the giddy top and whispering gallery of St. Paul's, the tombs of Westminster, the giants of Guildhall, Bedlam and the two figures at its gates, streets without end and churches numberless, statues with flowery gardens in vast squares, the monument and armoury of the Tower."
A guidebook would set out the great sights of London just in this way, as might a conventional literary description setting the scene. Gorgeous ladies and streets without end are fanciful ideas that might entice a tourist, but these imaginative stimuli are contained neatly within place names, from Vauxhall to London Tower. The extent of the city is regulated by these fixtures. The place names have the effect of shaping London. Visitors to London would want to see these places. The city appears orderly and structured when expressed as a series of landmarks. The artistic representations show them as calm and dignified places. For one thing, they don't look overcrowded. And all the people portrayed in these images look very genteel. There's no sign of poverty, no sign of social unrest. We might get our bearings as visitors by latching on to these tourist attractions, their size, location, recognisable architecture. They symbolise the identity of the city and are perhaps a comfort to the stranger who is forearmed with the familiar imagery which can also act as a means of orientation. And I think Wordsworth sets up a very deliberate irony by adopting the clichés of the guidebooks here. He demonstrates that the layout of the city can be known even to someone who hasn't been there, but its people are unknown even to its residents. As with anyone, Wordsworth's attitude to the new place is shaped by his experiences of places he has known previously.
It's worth reflecting on how the spaces we know prepare us for new experience, new kinds of place. Monash in Clayton, to an extent in Caulfield, is quite like a city in its own right.
Have you heard the Old English definition of a city as a place that has a pub, a post office and a cathedral? Monash has a post office and a pub. It may not have a cathedral, but it has a multi-faith centre. Safe to say that Cambridge was not like this in Wordsworth's time. In fact, it was like a monastery, an entirely male community dressed in black, and they had to attend church service every day. Safe to say, Wordsworth was in for the shock of his life when he got to London.